Good morning to everyone tuning in from the US.
And good morning as well to everyone tuning in from the Philippines.
And welcome to our February community virtual event.
This is the Voices of Filipino American Youth represents celebrating Black History Month, finding the common ground of Black identities.
My name is Ardia Lim, and I am a sophomore and a second year student at UC Berkeley.
My name is Maui Wabi. I'm currently a junior at Mira Mesa High School, and I'm the co-president of the Mira Mesa Philam Club.
My name is Marcus Frazier. I am also a junior at Mira Mesa High School, and I'm the other co-president of Mira Mesa High School's Philam Club.
All right, so before we get started with today's event, we would like to talk to you guys about our organization. So Voices of Philam Youth is a US-based coalition of Filipino and Filipino American students, educators, and community organizers who share a vision of empowering Filipino American youth through critical engagement and discourses that speaks to their diasporic and transnational identities.
And through different platforms, Voices of the Philam Youth aim to educate and be educated by their diverse experiences and networks with educators and icons and their solidarity work in their respective communities.
A reminder, please use our main hashtag VotFiXBHM and the tagline Voices of the Philam Youth.
And we would also like to encourage everyone to leave your questions, your thoughts, and comments in the comment section below, and we will be monitoring them as our event progresses.
And we would also like to encourage you guys to check out our social media accounts. We have an Instagram, which is at Voices of the Philam Youth, and we also have a Facebook, which is Voices of the Filipino American Youth, and a Twitter, which is at Philam Voices.
And we would like to give our special thanks to our sponsors for today. As we will enumerate them, we have the Filipino School, the Filipino Press, Philameda, which stands for Filipino American Educators Association of San Diego, Filipino Resource Center, Asian Pacific Islander Initiative, and Porky's Lechon and Barbecue.
All right, so first of all, happy Black History Month. We're happy and honored to celebrate and share this month with everyone in this virtual community.
We have a great lined up program for you all today. We have several keynote speakers who come here to talk about their knowledge, expertise, and experiences regarding Black history.
And the guests that we will be having have made significant impacts and contributions to their respective communities. As they identify as educators, community organizers, resources, and public servants. And they have not only made headlines, but their work and identities have also been shaped by their Black identity.
So before we introduce our keynote speakers with us today, we would like to give you all a bit of trivia about the individuals who identify as Black and Filipino. They all have made significant impacts through their work and passions.
So first of all, we're going to start with an artist, her. She was born in Vallejo, California, to a Filipino mother and an African-American father. She can play 5 instruments, a pianist, drummer, and masterful guitarist who can also solo with the electric, acoustic, and bass guitar. She recently performed at the Super Bowl 2021 edition, singing America the Beautiful. Her was nominated for 5 Grammy Awards and the 61st Annual Grammy Awards in 2019, winning Best R&B Performance and Best R&B Album.
All right, thank you, Marcus. Up next, we would like to highlight Apple the App. As we all know, he's part of the very famous legendary group, the Black Eyed Peas, who became internationally famous as they won the Grammys for 3 straight years in 2005, 2006, and 2007, making Apple the App the first Filipino to receive this honor. And one of his songs actually became an anthem in the Philippines and worldwide, Bebot. He is also a native of Angeles, Pampanga, and currently he's doing philanthropic works in the Philippines. He has also coached multiple times for the Voice of the Philippines.
Now, we would like to introduce our first keynote speaker with us today. Dr. Richard Vernon Moore is a San Diego native and the son of Doctors Jean and Jewel Moore. In 1994, he earned his bachelor's degree from UCLA. In 2014, Dr. Moore earned his doctorate degree in educational leadership from SDSU. His research into the dynamic systems that surround education culminated with his dissertation titled Bureaucratic Structures in Urban High Schools. He has worked in education for over 25 years, serving as a teacher, dean of students, testing coordinator, vice principal, principal, and district administrator. In February 2021, he was named the Chief of Educational Equity and Support Services for the Sweetwater Union High School District. In this position, Dr. Moore serves as the district's primary leader for its efforts to ensure all students have an equity-based opportunities for success. Most importantly, Dr. Moore and his beautiful wife, Gwen, are proud parents of Ricky and Kaya Jewel. Please welcome Dr. Richard Vernon Moore.
Good morning, Dr. Moore.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Wow, what a great introduction. And I'm so pleased to be here and the energy of you young people, Maui, Marcus, RDL.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, thank you so much for accepting our invitation for today's event. It's a Saturday morning, and we really appreciate you having on our space.
No problem. And I just, again, I'm so pleased with the energy and the knowledge of you young people getting active and involved in your communities. So I'm really honored to be here this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you have, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, well, to start us off, could you tell us how you've been, how have you and your family been coping up during this pandemic? Have you discovered any new hobbies while being with your family and in quarantine?
Yes, and thank you for the question. And I will tell you, as you know, all of you have probably experienced, the pandemic has hit our communities extraordinarily hard. Particularly African American, the Filipino community, other communities of color. I think anytime you look at statistics, our communities have been hit harder than others. And that's because we're frontline workers, we're tight-knit communities, and we're out in the world helping folks. And so thank you for asking. My family is doing well, and we're my wife and I are both educators, and so we've continued to work and trying to help our students connect in this distance learning world. It's certainly been a challenge. I'm sure all of you recognize that. But we're actually very hopeful because vaccination rates are going up, and we are looking forward to a time when we can start bringing our students back safely to our campuses so we can get back to in-person learning.
That's true. Well, thank you, and it's good to hear that your family is doing well. As educators, it was also a pivot. With distance learning, we all miss in person, getting that interaction with students. But yeah, thank you.
So to start us off, Dr. Moore, what does Black History Month mean to you?
Thank you. And it's such a pleasure to be here for Black History Month and have this discussion and what it means to me. I mean, growing up in an African American family, the idea of Black history was very important to us and to me growing up and knowing aspects of my culture. For me personally, Black history is really about my culture's contribution to this great country. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that one of the titans of Black history was Mary McLeod Bethune. She, growing up in the South, started a college and education setting for women, and that developed into a university in Daytona Beach, Florida, Bethune-Cookman College. And my connection to Mary McLeod Bethune is that my grandfather, who I share a name with, Richard. He's also Richard Vernon Moore. He's passed, but he was the president of Bethune-Cookman College in the 60s and 70s. And to have someone like that in my own family history really brings home the notion of Black history and the contributions that our cultures have made to our country. I would also, be remiss if I didn't kind of talk about sort of the origins of Black history and the Carter G. Woodson, the great educator who was actually one of the he was the second African American graduate from Harvard with a doctorate after W.E.B. Du Bois, again, another Black history titan. And Carter G. Woodson felt that as he had attained one of the highest achievements in education, earning a doctorate degree from one of the top universities in the world, he still felt that the portrayal of African Americans and our contributions were underplayed in history and in literature and other facets. And so he developed the notion of what, again, this would have been in the 1920s and 30s, Negro History Week. And that came about in February. He chose February specifically. I heard LeBron James last night, the basketball player, say, "Oh, Black History is in the shortest month," but that month was actually selected by Carter G. Woodson because it coincides with the birthdays of President Abraham Lincoln, known for the Emancipation Proclamation, of course, and Frederick Douglass, the former slave turned statesman, who is, again, just another titan and another person that has to be considered when we're talking about the picture of Black history. So Carter G. Woodson picked February as the month for Black history, and it started off as a week, and it was a time where we needed to reflect and empower ourselves with the knowledge of what our contributions are. And so to be at a forum like this with, focusing on Filipino heritage and culture is such an important aspect because, we young people need to have this knowledge. Our cultures, everyone's culture is worthy of study. And that was the real point Carter G. Woodson was trying to get across, was that no one's culture, history, and contributions should be overshadowed or overlooked. We've all contributed to this great country, and we need to be recognized as such.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Dr. Moore. You mentioned how we're intentional in having February as Black History Month, but we also have to acknowledge that every day, should be Black History Month. Every day should be Filipino American History Month. It's just basic appreciation. That's the least and the best we can do. Well, you mentioned earlier that both you and your wife are educators, and recently you just took a very huge responsibility and position for the Sweetwater Union High School District as the Chief of Educational Equity and Support Services. So could you like to share with us some of your thoughts of what is your definition of educational equity?
Yeah, this is a great question, and thank you, for mentioning that every day and every month is Black History Month, Filipino History Month, Latino history. I mean, we have to understand that tomorrow doesn't end our focus on Black history, and a lot of times that is an issue because we see a lot of conferences and dates and times, packed into February, the shortest month of the year. But really, we also need to recognize the contributions throughout the year. So thank you for saying that. Educational equity is really this effort. So it's really the distinction between equity and equality. we certainly in the United States have this notion of equality pretty well accepted. I mean, we understand that we all should have equal rights, and we all should have an equal shot at getting something, that the playing field for us to achieve should be equal. But we also, most of us, recognize that there are inequities and inequalities that that we face, and those inequities are primarily due to racism and discrimination. An example being, there are parts of town in recent decades that folks of color couldn't buy a home in because they were called redlined neighborhoods or areas where a real estate agent, and I talked to my parents. I've grown up in San Diego, California. My parents moved to San Diego in the 60s from the South, but they were, even then in the 1960s, real estate agents would refuse to show them specific areas of San Diego in order to buy a home. That type of racism and discrimination has an overall effect on the achievement and accomplishments. Those are barriers that we face just based on culture, identity, and otherwise. And so when you think of educational equity, it's really poking holes in those barriers. An example for an example of that would be applicable to schools would be taking a look at advanced classes or honors classes, sometimes advanced placement, AP classes, and looking at the demographic in that class, and does that demographic reflect the school's overall population, or is it disproportionate in other numbers? In other words, are there lots of students of color similar to the population of the school? Are those reflected in your advanced classes? Another aspect of educational equity is when we look at suspension numbers. And this is really troubling, particularly in the African American community. Suspension rates in public schools in California, San Diego, and even in the Sweetwater Union High School District where I work are alarmingly high for African American students, particularly African American males, but females not very far behind. And so when we look at the rates of suspension for our different populations, we have to understand that our students, while the reasons may be there, we have to analyze what's underneath those suspensions. And one of the key places we're looking at is the suspension code that's called defiance and disruption, because that's a subjective thing. I may see something that you say in class as defiant and disruptive, and another person may see it as, oh, they're engaging, and maybe they're just a little rambunctious. I think the point I'm getting at is that educational equity is about analyzing these inequities, looking at data, and then finding ways into our educators' minds and hearts so that they can begin to see the whole child and address any internal biases and implicit biases they may have, and then in turn support the achievement for all students, and really attain that equal playing field that we're all so accustomed and attuned to have.
Thank you so much for shedding light on that. We noticed there are nuances in defining equity, equality, liberation, and justice. So most of the time, these terms are conflated, and this significantly affects the way we see and perceive access, opportunity, and resources in this country. Marcus, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it's really important for like the people in our communities to understand that there is like a lot of work that has to be done. And we know that your work amplifies like the educators and especially the students, because it's like you guys are working with the differences that each student has to try and like make it together and bring the differences together so that they can all have like an equal opportunity for success in life.
That's true.
Yeah, and I think we're at a very special moment right now. Right now, we've all been exposed to the Black Lives Matter movement. It really came into focus and prominence after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. The protests, the energy around it, and that was in the middle of while we are dealing with this pandemic that's hitting
Yeah.
our neighborhoods and communities harder than others. And so I think right now, and I think it's evident in this conversation that I get to have with you all, that this is a moment where not only the older heads of our community, like myself, are coming together saying, see, we've been talking about this for years, but now young people are beginning to really access and acknowledge some of these inequities and realizing that we need to address these in a very large way. I think in our political climate that we're in right now, coming on the heels of the attack on the Capitol building, and now moving towards hopefully some reconciliation around that the voices of young people are so important. And so I'm really pleased to hear the kinds of conversations that you all are having. And my job as an educator around educational equity is to make sure your voices are amplified. So again, I am honored to be here, and I thank you so much for this opportunity to speak on such a great event and at such a great time.
Thank you. And with that, our last question is, what is your message to the youth?
My message is particularly to you three, keep doing what you're doing. Reach out to your friends and through all of your avenues that you have, your social media and the TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and all of the things that you guys do. Keep up the work and take pride in yourselves and take pride in your culture, because where you're from, who you are in your identity is everything. It's so important. And I encourage all of you to continue this exploration into your own histories, your own family histories, as well as the contributions you and others like you have made in our society. So my message is keep it up. Keep doing what you're doing and push harder for all of the acknowledgments, all of the aspects that you can to bring your culture and your identities into focus. These are the things we should be studying in our history classes, and I know that you guys are the voices that can push that forward.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That really means a lot.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
Dr.
guys.
Moore. Yeah, thank you.
So that was Dr. Vernon Moore. We will now, before continuing on to our next keynote speaker, we will be doing a bit more trivia.
Yes. So for this segment, we would like to highlight Captain Fagan. So I know that most of you have heard and studied the Filipino American War in your U.S. history classes. The Filipino American War was bloody and genocidal. It was a holy war of conquest as well. And the Black infantry soldiers, also known as Buffalo soldiers, were sent to the Philippines to fight the Filipino revolutionaries. They felt that fighting in this war would enhance recognition in the United States. However, they were also vocal in opposition of the U.S. invasion of the Philippines. And they verbalized support with the Philippine independence and against subjugating non-white people. They understand the similarity of their experiences in the U.S. with experiences of the people in the Philippines. Filipino revolutionists discouraged the Black soldiers for being instruments against people of color. And as a result, many soldiers actually defected and joined the Filipino revolutionaries instead. They were very welcome and well respected. And one of these well-known soldiers is actually Private David Fagan, who became Captain David Fagan. Captain Fagan could no longer conduct himself as an instrument of white racism or American imperialism. So he decided to join the Philippine Liberation Army under President Emilio Aguinaldo, the first president of the Philippines. Quote unquote, Captain David Fagan became the most notorious and hated American traitor during the Filipino American War, and simultaneously, he also became a Philippine hero. And all these information is according to the book David Fagan, Turncoat Hero by Philip Hoffman.
All right, thank you so much, Argel. So for our next keynote speaker, we have with us today Dr. Shirley Nash Weber. She was recently nominated to serve as California Secretary of State by Governor Gavin Newsom on December 22nd, 2020, and was sworn into office on January 29th, 2021. She is California's first Black Secretary of State and only the 5th African American to serve as a state constitutional officer in California's 170-year history. Dr. Weber attended UCLA, where she received her BA, MA, and PhD by the age of 26. Prior to receiving her doctorate, she became a professor at SDSU at the age of 23. She also taught at California State University at Los Angeles and Los Angeles City College before coming to SDSU. She retired from the Department of Africana Studies after 40 years as a faculty member and serving several terms as a department chair. Before her appointment, Secretary Weber served 4 years as an assembly member representing California's 79th Assembly District, which includes parts of the city of San Diego, as well as several cities and communities in the San Diego region. Weber also served as a member and chair of the San Diego Unified School District and has twice served as California elector, including chairing the California College of Presidential Electors on December 14th, 2020. Dr. Weber was the first African American to serve as the chair of the Assembly Budget Committee. She also served as a member of the Standing Committees on Education, Higher Education, Elections, Budget, Banking, and Finance. From 2019 to 2020, she served as chair of California Legislative Black Caucus, CLBC, which consists of the state's African American legislators and has the goal of promoting equal opportunity for California's African American community. Dr. Weber broke records during her tenure by garnering extraordinary support for CLBC's efforts and its projects. Dr. Weber's genuine passion and tireless quest for equality and fairness in all sectors of life has resulted in her pursuit of reforms in education and criminal justice. Secretary Weber is a mother of two, has 3 grandchildren, and was married for 29 years to the late Honorable Daniel Weber. So without further ado, we would like to give a warm welcome to Dr. Shirley Weber.
Well, thank you so very much, and thank you for having me here this morning. I'm really quite honored always to have young people take an interest in not only what I do, but more importantly, an interest in their community and want to be active in their community and make a difference. So I'm really honored to be with you all this morning. You could be doing anything else in the world on a Saturday morning other than talking about this subject, and yet you have chosen to do so, and you have invited us here. So thank you so very much for having me here today. I think you have a number of questions to ask me, and I'm more than happy to answer those questions. But I do really thank you so very much. The Filipino community is an extremely important community in San Diego, but also throughout California, and your history is so interwoven with our history and makes such a difference in what you do. When I served on the school board, I represented a lot of Paradise Hills, and I got a chance to be a part of an awful lot of activities and cultural activities and celebrations. And I was fortunate to be the person to really push forward to make sure Tagalog was taught in our schools as one of our our languages, and it was quite my honor to do that, as well as to name the bridge for Ilion that is also in the community, because I recognize that the Filipino community is a valuable community whose history is often ignored, and sometimes because it's so interwoven with U.S. history and the World War II, that it sometimes is forgotten, and we should not forget the strength and the importance of that community. So I'm honored to be with you today, and honored that you see value in African American history as well. So I'm happy to answer your questions and to be a part of your program this morning.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to talk with you today. But first, how have you been? How's your family, and how have they been like during this crazy time of the pandemic?
Yeah, these are crazy times, and it's been really hard, I think, for those of us who love other people, who love to interact. I know it's really hard for young people, because you guys are really, really social individuals, and while you thought the whole world revolved around your technology and that you could live on your phone and those kind of things, that gets kind of old after a while. I'm sure you realize that there's nothing that replaces the heartbeat and the human feeling that you get when you see someone else. It's been a challenge. It's been a challenge for us in Sacramento. We had to reduce when I was in the legislature, we had to reduce our number of bills because we couldn't meet and all those kinds of things. But we were committed to focusing on the issues that we had to do. But and so it's been hard, even as the Secretary of State, to have 600 people working for me and not see any of them other than on Zoom. It's quite a challenge to do. But, one of the things I've learned in this thing, as we should all learn whenever we're going through something as difficult as COVID and being isolated and away, is that you really should stop for a moment and realize that there's some things that come good out of it. The fact that people have learned a lot more about technology. My sisters and brothers that are older who had flip phones now have, now have smartphones, and they've been pulled into the present by technology. But equally important, as a family, I come from a family of 8 kids. There were 8 of us, and it's interesting because we're a very close family, but we didn't really value each other in terms of not seeing each other often. My sisters and brothers are in LA and North County and all those places, and the COVID has actually brought us closer together. We meet every Sunday at 5 o'clock on Zoom. And my sisters and brothers and my nieces and nephews, and most of the time we never miss a meeting. And because we have learned to value each other, and we miss each other, where before we just took it for granted. We wouldn't see each other for months, but we just figured, they're away. But now we actually miss each other. And so we've learned something about COVID. I think that makes us stronger as a family, stronger as individuals, helps us to really live with ourselves and meditate sometimes and those kinds of things. So we have to remember when we come out of COVID, don't forget the good things we learned, because those are important. And we have to, and if that makes us better, then obviously COVID served the purpose. But it's been a challenge, no question. It's been a challenge.
That's true. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. I believe it is important for families to reconnect and really just interact at these times. Before I get started, let me just say you look very lovely this morning.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
So getting into the first question, what does Black History Month mean to you?
Every year I take Black History Month as a time for reflection and for time for me to learn. And I think it's important because, my theory about Black History Month is a little different than a lot of other folks. Sometimes think it's our term to learn about the heroes and heroines and those kinds of things, and it is. But when you think about history is the one subject that young folks have to do almost every year. And it's not because you can't memorize the heroes and heroines that exist, but it's because it is in the process of trying to ingrain in your mind that this is a great country, that these are great people, that they can do extraordinary things even with limited resources, and that we should be proud. I say that because when I look at Black history, every year I learn something different about my family that makes me proud. I learned a lot more about how my father got to California, or I learned about how my family survived during difficult times. And each one of those lessons that I learned about, or how Black people came here and had nothing, and how they struggled to create things, and the societies and the social organizations, all those things, it says to me that, I come from people who are really, really strong. and that we interface with people in a community that also made us strong and helped us. And so each time I study my history, I say studying history is in the process of developing your character. Who are you? What do you stand on? What are you made of? And so when you get in difficult times, as I sometimes have been in difficult times in the legislature, trying to pass bills to protect young people from police violence and those kinds of things, and I feel like I can't do it, I reflect back on those who did a lot more than I'm doing with a lot less resources. And it helps me understand that, I come from people who can make something out of nothing. And that strengthens me. And I say to myself oftentimes, wow, why should I be afraid? So-and-so wasn't afraid, or my father wasn't afraid, or somebody else wasn't afraid. And they faced far more vicious individuals than I could ever face. And that strengthens me. That gives me hope and gives me purpose, and it helps me to stand.
Yeah. You mentioned about how important history is in developing your character. And I think you've heard of this saying, no history, no self.
Exactly.
And it just means so much for us to know, history, and it's a process, and it's also a continuum of looking back at where we were in the past, who we are now, and who might we become in the future.
Exactly.
So it's very interesting. Yeah.
Exactly. It makes you proud. When you think about what your parents came here with, and see what they've been able to accomplish against all those odds. You
Yes.
then have to realize, wow, I can't just throw this away. I just can't make nothing out of this. I have a responsibility. Folks have poured so much into me that I cannot forget them. I cannot ignore them, because I'm a reflection of them.
Mhm.
And Maya Angelou says, I'm the hope and dream of the slave. That they thought about years before I was ever born, that there would be somebody like me to stand up for them. And so we can't deny our legacy once we understand it and we work to accomplish it. No question. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I believe cultural identity is a very important factor in your life, and I think that once you figure that out, it starts to impact you, and then you start to upbuild your life from there.
Yes.
So going on to our next question, how do you think that Black History Month should be celebrated?
Well, I think Black History Month should be a spark that starts us for the year. And it's like, we have Chinese New Year, we have this New Year, we have that. We should have a Black New Year. And it should begin in February and then continue throughout the year, so that we don't think that it's one and done, that tomorrow there will be the end of Black history. No, it started February 1, this new history of Black history, this new year of Black history, and that it should be carried forward. And we should try to make it our business to learn something different every month about African Americans, about Latinos, about Filipinos, about whites. We should make it. It should be incorporated in our life of what we want to do. And February 1 to me is just a reminder. Sometimes we forget. It's just a reminder. Oh wow, let's do something exciting. Let's kick it off. But it doesn't end until January 31st, and then we start it again.
Yeah. Definitely.
I totally agree. I think, like Arjun said, it should be an everyday thing, and we should continue to learn about different cultures.
No question. Yes.
So our next question is, how does it feel to be California Secretary of State as a woman and a person of color?
First it was quite a surprise, because it was something that had not been anticipated and I had not lobbied for or asked for, interestingly enough. But I think it serves as it reminds me that, if you work hard and you work with a sense of dignity and purpose, that people will see you, even when you're not looking, people will see you. And the governor obviously saw me. He saw the work I did. He knew what I was about. He understood my passion for things, and tapped me to become Secretary of State. It was not something I anticipated. A year ago, I wouldn't have told you that would never happen. 6 months, I would have said it would never happen. 3 months ago, I would have said the same thing. So it to me, it was quite an honor to be seen, to be recognized for the work that I've done. But also, I keep reminding folks that, I'm the first in 170 years. And I always think that's an honor, but also say, why did it take so long? Why did it take so long, 170 years for me to become, to have an African American as Secretary of State. And then I look at it as a tremendous honor and responsibility because the Secretary of State is one of, it's like the third in succession of who would become governor in some sense. There's a governor, this lieutenant governor, then there's a Secretary of State in terms of state officers. So it's a tremendous responsibility to be in that position in a state like California, the largest state in the union. But I think at the same time, it reminds me that I stand on the shoulders of some amazing individuals, that I understand the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and I understand what happens when people are disenfranchised and cannot vote, as my father could not vote in Hope, Arkansas, and my grandparents never got a chance to vote in Arkansas. So it reminds me of this tremendous responsibility I have to make sure that everyone understands how important voting is, because I come out of a legacy of where voting was denied, and yet once achieved, it changed the world for so many people. And to remind folks that this is important. So I take my responsibility as Secretary of State as an African American very seriously. As a woman, I take it very seriously because also women just got to vote 100 years ago. And what that means to us in terms of women pushing forward not only the vote, but pushing forward in terms of having position, and Kamala Harris being vice president. There's a lot of things happening that we have to celebrate. And we cannot take our eyes off the ball, because what happens is that we can sometimes become complacent. And when we do, we lose our focus and we lose our ground. And you don't want to do that. And so often we see that even in race relations, where we had such a tremendous focus on race relations, and then all of a sudden we see all this hatred being developed and all these things coming forward that make us embarrassed that this is a country that has such hatred for people of color. And that's because sometimes we become complacent, okay? And we have to stay focused and committed to the work that's here. And I think you young folks recognize that you cannot stop paying attention to the racism that you face and that others face. You have to fight for that every day.
Thank you so much for bringing attention to that. We would like to acknowledge that you're an amazing role model, especially to this younger generation. We have there's so many little girls who get to grow up with having a female Secretary of State and also a vice president. So it's amazing to see that representation in government, and to have our voices be heard.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And lastly, we would like to ask you, what is your message for the young generation?
Well, the message is fairly simple, that the most important thing you have is your dignity and your honor. And that becomes important. And when you work hard, always with the focus that you're going to do it with the kind of trust, the transparency, the honesty, the dignity that's there, that your word matters, that who you are, whether you're poor or rich, that your word matters. And I think that more than anything else is important. When I was voted on and confirmed in the Senate and the Assembly, people noted that in each house, no one voted against my appointment. There were no votes. And even some of my Republican colleagues who didn't want to, quote, vote for a Democrat publicly because of their constituents refused to vote against me. And many of them said that. Many of them said, I will not put a no vote on this. Because, why? Because I've been honest. I've been a trustworthy person with them. I have embraced their issues as human beings. I've been a person they can always talk to. I was a woman of honor. And you can't buy that. You cannot buy that, young people. So if you're a person of honor, you cannot buy your honor, and never, ever give it away, because it will always serve you well as you go to school, as you interface with business, all those kinds. There'll be temptations always to take your honor, but don't give it up. Maya Angelou says that it is impossible for you to have courage without having values. Because what happens is that your values can never be expressed unless you have courage to stand for them. And people look at that, and when they may disagree with you, they will respect you because you stood firm on what you believed and the values that you had about life. So if I say anything to you, hold fast to your values. When I was a kid graduating from high school, one of her former teachers, she wasn't my teacher, she's just a teacher that I knew, sent me this thing from Shakespeare that says, above all things, to thine own self be true. And I remember that since I was 18 years old.
Well, no, yeah. You mentioned that your nomination and your appointment is a bipartisan decision. You know, no votes, um, and I think it just speaks volume of your character. It speaks volume that you are a person of honor. That your work, your passion, your identities, they all kind of like mixed and really brought you to where you are now. And you know, as members, as young people, as Philam youth, as with Marcus, with Maui, we see your work. We see that you know a lot of work has to be done, and that you being a Secretary of State and a public servant will just really amplify the voices um, and really the issues that are close to our heart in higher education and all these other facets of our society. Just you know, we see you, we hear you, we appreciate you, and we honor you. Thank you so much, Dr. Weber.
Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much. And I learned the other day that there are a lot of internships in my office in Sacramento, and hopefully there'll be some in this area here. But don't hesitate to look and see about coming to participate. And many of the internships are paid. So would love to have some of you join my office, have a very diverse population of young people working in the Secretary of State's office. Wish you well. Thank you for having me this morning. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Weber.
Dr. Weber.
That was Dr. Weber, everyone. I think that she is a very admirable woman, and I believe that the fact that she is very passionate about what she does makes her success even that more great. Before we move on to the last keynote speaker, we will head back to a little bit more trivia.
So we would like to give attention to Nikita Miguel Roy. So Nikita Miguel Roy is a Black Filipina currently residing in Hawaii. A proud Bisaya, she's also a model, cyclist, and educator. On her third bid at representing Miss Hawaii USA, she represented Waikiki, Hawaii, and was recently named as Miss Hawaii's first runner-up in the recently concluded Miss Hawaii 2021.
All right. So we are now actually down to our third guest. We would like to welcome Ms. Joanne Fields, from the Director of Filipino Resource Center.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for the honor.
Good morning.
Of course. Thank you so much, Miss Joanne. You know, much nice to have you on a Saturday morning. You know, time to talk with us about your identity, the work that you've been doing, really, for the communities that you're working with. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It is an honor to join all of you and to work in purpose. I advocate for communities of color, and yes, to represent my Filipino culture and heritage, but also for my kids who are multiracial. My kids are Filipino and African American. So for this celebration to be occurring with all of you, the voices of Phil-Am youth, it's very important that we hand down and produce a hand up so that you have opportunities to share our histories that intersect. Dr. Jose Rizal is our famous Philippine national. He has a quote that states, "He who does not know how to look back at where he came from will never get to his destination." And he also states that the youth is the hope of our future. What I like to say is our youth are not leaders of tomorrow, you're leaders of today. We just need to provide opportunities for you to exercise your leadership skills. So again, thank you for sharing your time on your program with me, because I'd like to share histories that I've learned myself. We know and we've heard from Dr. Vernon Moore that Carter G. Woodson is the father of Black history, but many don't know that he was a principal and opened schools in the Philippines in 1903. He was assigned in the Philippines to run schools for the US government for 4 years there. So the father of Black history also studied Filipino American history We cannot forget that the Philippines was under the US rule. We were under their government. We were a commonwealth of the Philippines. So we do have histories that, again, intersect. So I'm excited that we do have ethnic studies coming down the pipeline, but this is American history. We shouldn't discount that. And like Dr. Weber said, is we should be celebrating every day of the year, and the specific February Black History Month is just a reminder, just like October is a reminder of Filipino History Month. Another great history that all of you had pointed out was the role of the Buffalo Soldiers in the Philippines. We hope to be able to connect you all with Ernest Buffalo Up. He's a descendant of a Buffalo Soldier, the Collier family. Ernest Collier is one out of 10 siblings that lives in San Diego. His father was stationed in the Philippines, his mother a Filipina. I learned that history from Rachel Hilliard, who coordinates activities with the Buffalo Soldiers San Diego chapter. So while we don't have a lot of this history written in the curriculum at today, we have living legends that know this history. Oral history can be passed on to all of you. And you can meet these people in person. That's another exciting thing, that they can share their parents' legacy, the history again of how we intersect. And again, instead of focusing on what our differences are, we can focus on our similarities and shared history. Because I think that's why some people fear not knowing. They don't know how we're connected. They don't know how we've been working together for decades and even centuries. So we must bring that back and keep demonstrating how we work together. Again, like Dr. Weber said, with COVID-19, it has really brought our families together. COVID-19 has magnified what I say um, lacks in the Filipino community, hence the Filipino Resource Center. We have seniors, the Bay Terrace seniors, that and many seniors in our community that have scarcity, food scarcity. We have partnered with I Am My Brother's Keeper, Mosque number 8, led by student minister Hugh Mohammed, where who also is in partnership with Paving Great Futures, both very strong African American led organizations helping the Filipino community. Every Friday at 12 o'clock, we're at Bay Terrace. The only times that we were not there on Friday was either due to weather or the lack of volunteers. All of this is run by volunteers, but I guarantee you, over 100 Filipino seniors and the surrounding neighbors in Paradise Hills is helped by I Am My Brother's Keeper and Paving Great Futures. So again, we must demonstrate how we work together and celebrate and embrace one another, and so that we can really erase racism and to overcome, it's more than words, it's actions. So and that's what I'd like for us to focus on. And I really commend all of you for the action that you're taking on a Saturday morning, where you could have been doing whatever else you wanted to do, but you produced this beautiful event with your ginang, and with many people behind the scenes. We really want to uplift all of you and celebrate what we have in common. And then lastly, we know that there has been a target on Asian Americans as of late because of COVID-19, that the former president has labeled it as the coronavirus, as a Chinese virus, and we have seen an uptick in violence against our community. There was an 80-year-old Lola that was attacked on the trolley when she was traveling from Encanto to downtown one morning. We also have a Navy veteran that was handled brutally in the same format as George Floyd. The veteran, his name, Mr. Quinto. This happened in Antioch, the city of Antioch. But we're seeing similarities. So we should not react because now it's happening in our community. This police brutality is taking place in all communities, and we must speak out. We must speak out with one another, and again, because we are stronger together. Angelo Quinto was suffering a mental health crisis on the night of December 23rd, 2020. His sister called 911. The police responded to his episode by kneeling on his neck. Later, he had died. And now there is an uproar. Over 300 people provided testimony at the Antioch City Council. We have to use our voices. We have to speak out on things that are wrong and be on the right side of issues together. Not because it happened to a Filipino or an African American, it happened to a human being, and we're noticing it's happening in our community, the Filipino community, the African American community. So let's stand together and continue to demonstrate how we can work together, how we can celebrate one another, and how we can really improve the quality of life of all San Diegans, of all Filipinos, of all African Americans, Latinos, everyone under the sun, because that's our charge. God gave us that gift, and we have to utilize that. So thank you for allowing me to share my experiences, celebrating my kids' multiculturalism, and to celebrate Black History Month with all of you. I think this is a great way, again, to demonstrate how we can embrace one another and live together peacefully here in San Diego. Thank you.
Thank
No,
you,
thank
Mrs.
you so
Montez.
much,
Thank you so much.
Ms. Joanne. Earlier we were just discussing about the importance of history, knowing self, building character, and the recent passage of the ethnic studies curriculum. It speaks volume. But then again, we also have to acknowledge that the history textbooks that we're studying are incomplete, and that more work needs to be done. The work of and the impact of the Buffalo Soldiers needs to be addressed. They need to be learned because, us as minority, our history is not all the time represented well. It's not always in the textbook, and most of the time, it's only like 1 or 2 pages in our textbooks.
So you all that's your charge. Our next generation of leaders, that you're the author. You can author these books. You can talk to scholars and document what they're sharing with you. It's written, it's in the Library of Congress in DC. And we don't have to wait for someone to say, okay, this is your start date. No, again, like we did today, oral history. But you can document it. You can be the author and fill the book with many histories that should be taught to your kids and their kids and the next generation.
Of course, yes. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Ms.
so
Joanne
much.
Fields, for taking time. Again, it really means so much for us to have you in our space. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So to close out the event, this event was made possible by the Filipino School, the Filipino Press, Filipino American Educators Association of San Diego, Filipino Resource Center, the Asian Pacific Islander Initiative, and Porky's Lechon and Barbecue.
And thank you to all our amazing guests and speakers, Dr. Vernon Moore, Ms. Joanne Fields, and Dr. Shirley Weber.
And we would just like to express our gratitude as well for the team behind the scene of the Voices of the Philam Youth, starting off with our producer, Ginang Jacqueline Lapid, to our bookkeeper, Ginang Annalyn Riego, our program and publisher head, Alan Nugget, our technical head as well, at the second for the social media, Clea Jordan, our program member, and to my co-moderators, Maui and Marcus, and Tyler, who is quite busy during these times. But I mean, thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, that concludes our event for today. Thank you so much for joining us today, and happy Black History Month.
Happy Black History
Black History Month, everyone.